All right, this is a video for a friend who was asking about grinding with a jig. I don't grind with a jig a whole lot, but sometimes I do. But if you're using a jig, there's a certain way you have to use it, or your tip and your heel of your knife will be thicker than the middle as you just pull across and grind with the jig. It won't evenly grind. So I was going to show him what I meant. I was telling him that to avoid that, when you grind, you need to pull the opposite side of your jig away. So what I mean by that is when I'm grinding with this jig, as I push into the belt and I go to slide from right to left, I'm going to pull with my left hand back this way. And so as I grind and I get close to the tip, I'm going to pull like this. And so it's going to be kind of a motion where I kind of slide it like that. And so this is just a little neck knife, but as I start grinding here and I get to the tip, as I get close to the tip, I'm going to pull with this hand like that and put a little pressure, and that's going to grind in that distal taper along the bottom. This is as simple as it gets. This is the jig I use occasionally when I'm wanting to use a jig for grinding bevels. It's just a couple of pieces of wood that are screwed together, and then I've got a bolt countersunk in a hole, and then or not a bolt, I got a nut countersunk with a bolt here that I can raise and lower to adjust my angle here. So anyway, let me crank this up. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I just did one pass, and of course you see there's just this one grind line that I put in. It's fairly equal all the way across, you know. So now that I did that one, I'll unscrew this and lower that angle back down a little bit and drop this down a little bit further. And so I'll just go straight across for a few times, but then as my grind line gets a little bit lower, I'll pull back on this side to push more pressure into this area here to grind more of this thin. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but see if I can get the camera a little bit better situated. Maybe I won't be blocking the camera too bad. Maybe like that. See, I'm going to start pulling with this hand. As I get further over, I'm going to pull. I'm not pulling a whole lot, just at the very end. As I go across, I'm just kind of coming away with it like that. So you see the bevel climbing down a little bit. That bevel's moving on down. That's all I'm going to do on that side. This is just a rough bevel here. So now what I need to do is switch to my other side. But you can see, so I got that bevel just about done on that side. Another thing is if you have forged your knife, rather than if it's a forged knife, you really should be forging that distal taper in before you get to the grinder anyway, and not be worried too much about having the tip too thick. But if you're doing a pure stock removal knife, then it's going to be the same thickness all the way around, and you're going to have to get rid of that thickness at the grinder. You're going to have to do your distal taper at the grinder. And so to do that, like I said, on that jig, as you go from left to right or right to left, as you move across, and this applies to freehand grinding too. So as you move across and as you get to where the tip, so let me see if I can get you closer. So watch. As the blade, if I'm starting here and grinding in near the ricasso, I'm starting here, and I'm going to go over. When the blade tip gets to about the edge of this side of the belt, that's when I want to start pulling back to try and grind in some of that taper. Now you have to be careful. If you do it too much, if you pull too much, then you'll grind this tip off. You'll have a real blunt, rolled tip. So it's kind of a feel thing. You have to kind of feel it. But as you go across, you'll just kind of gently pull. But just be careful that you don't do something really, at a hard angle, because then you'll roll that tip over. But yeah, like I said, it applies to freehand grinding as well as grinding with a jig. And I don't have any problem with people using with jigs. I mean, there's some knife making purists, I guess you might call them, that say, oh, you should never use a jig. Well, I mean, if that's the case, then I don't want to see you using a jig to file your, for your shoulders for your guard. You better do that by hand too. Jigs are tools. Use the tools if you need the tool. If you want to jig by freehand, jig by freehand. Grind by freehand. But I don't see a problem in using grinding jigs. For one thing, they help you get a feel for what's happening with the steel without completely screwing up the piece of steel right off the bat. So jigs can be a good learning tool as well.